Welcome back to our podcast on conflict sensitivity. We'll recall that in the first podcast, we focused on defining what a conflict-sensitive approach entails. Specifically, we focused on three core areas. Conflict-sensitive approaches require us to understand the conflict context in which we're working, to understand the interaction between that conflict context and our interventions, and then to act accordingly to maximize the positives and minimize the negatives. What does this mean? In that first podcast, we defined each of those steps and what is required in order to make sure that we're conflict sensitive. Today's podcast will focus on the first step, which is looking at the role that conflict analysis plays in the implementation of a conflict-sensitive program. So the first step of a conflict-sensitive approach entails doing detailed conflict analysis. For PERL, it's very, very important that we have a very structured approach to our conflict analysis. What does that mean exactly? We remember in the project cycle, we typically do analysis at the inception of the project, we begin implementation, and then we monitor. A conflict-sensitive approach means that we embed conflict analysis at the center of everything that we do. For PERL, this becomes essential as a mechanism to understand the ways in which we as a program, implementing governance reform and improving service delivery, are doing so in a way that does no harm. For PERL, there are three different conflict analysis tools that are typically used. One focuses on conflict or stakeholder mapping. That's understanding the different actors that are involved, their positions, their interests in the conflict dynamics. One is called the conflict tree, which is trying to help us understand the difference between drivers of conflict and manifestations of conflict, or the cause and effect of different conflict dynamics. And the last one is looking at the stages of conflict, which enables us to understand if conflict is actually getting worse or getting better, or in other words, is it escalating or de-escalating. PERL uses all three of these conflict analysis models, but embeds them inside our political economy analysis. In this way, PERL is able to do one analytical model, meaning political economy analysis, but pull out or deduce the different areas in which conflict dynamics are playing a role. Why is this important? Well, in the structure of PERL, we are able to do this analysis at the inception of every single intervention cycle and update it regularly. It's one of the key dynamics of a conflict-sensitive approach, regularly updating. PERL does so using what is called the Political Economy Conflict-Sensitive and Gender-Sensitive Tracker. This is done every 3 months by the delivery teams and intervention teams in order to assess the changes in the dynamics, the individuals, and the drivers of conflict in a particular conflict setting. PERL's approach to the role that conflict analysis plays in the program is essential. Based on those analytical tools mentioned before, the conflict tree, stakeholder mapping, and stages of conflict, which are embedded into our overall political economy tool, PERL is able to use this analysis with the delivery teams to understand how our activities, planned or ongoing, may interact with these dynamics. In our next podcast, we'll talk about that two-way interaction, and we'll look at some of the ways in which the PERL program is using this analysis to understand the potential that our program has to do harm and make adjustment strategies accordingly. So please join us for the next podcast.